So for our last presentation of the day, we have Funke Adekoya, who is going to speak to us about the role that women have mentoring other women in peace and development. So she's a partner at one of the largest full-service commercial law firms in Nigeria. She heads a dispute resolution practice group, amongst many, many other things. She's a board member of a recently established Lagos Court of Arbitration, as well as the African Users Council of LCIA. And alongside that, she's a member of many notable international arbitration advisory boards, too many to actually mention now.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I hope that what I'm going to talk about will be of interest. My background is in law and in arbitration. And I'm actually going to put that as the framework for what I want to talk about, which is how do we as women help ourselves? We've heard, I came at the tail end of the first session, and I've heard a bit, and I do know a bit about the problems that women have. There was a comment which moved me deeply because I thought that that was exactly the position, that one of the main barriers to the role of women in peace and development is cultural, especially in Africa. There is a belief, a cultural belief in many African countries that no matter how highly educated you may be, your first and major role as a woman is to be a wife. Your second major role is to be a mother. Your third role is to be somebody's sister or daughter. And you can be a high-flying lawyer, you could be a doctor, you could be a judge, you could be an engineer, you can be anything you want to be, as long as it does not impact upon those cultural roles. Now, if you look at it from the point of view of the average African man's expectations, which is that, fine, I'm married now, I don't have to make my own breakfast. I don't have to make my own lunch. I don't have to make my own dinner. And I've had this discussion where a gentleman actually said, I am totally supportive of my wife's career and her ambition, and she can do whatever it is she wants to do, as long as I get my breakfast, my lunch, my dinner, my clothes are clean, the house is taken care of, the kids go to school, she does PTA, she does the woman's job. It's not going to work, but there are some tips and suggestions that some women have developed in climbing the cultural ladder and in climbing their professional ladders at the same time. And what I want to bring to the table is that in too many instances, women struggle to overcome cultural barriers. We struggle to break the glass ceiling at work. And when we do that, we've made it. We see ourselves sometimes, or we are seen within our various professions as examples to be held up. The first female Attorney General, the first female Supreme Court judge, the first female doctor, the first female representative at the World Court. But many of us who have had the privilege, one, of being educated, and it is a privilege in Africa at least. And not only you've had the privilege of being educated, you've had the privilege of being able to put that education to use. And I pause here to say that from the point of view of Nigeria, there is a particular part of the country where the attitude of the man is, I'm not going to get married until I am financially stable enough to support a family, because that's what men do. It is my obligation to take care of my family. And then when they do get married, they will invariably marry professional women. And then say, but you can't work. You're my wife. You're supposed to take care of my house. You are, and ornament. And that has its own social tensions. Because what's the point if you have studied law, or studied medicine, or studied engineering, and then you can't practice your profession? So being able to practice your profession, even if it's just an administrative role and you are working, is a privilege. And if you do it well, you will progress within that profession. The issues that I want to bring to the table is that we then need to remind ourselves that that's not the be-all and the end-all. We have to realize that we are privileged. I've spoken to many female lawyers in the West. And the fact that I have an inbuilt cultural, social network that enables me to go out to work, knowing that I have a young female relative who's living in my house, who in exchange for my educating her, will pick my children from school, take them to school, monitor them whilst I'm at work, is a social network in itself, which if I were in the West, I'd be paying through my nose for childcare. And so having discovered that and realized that, we as women who have been able to enjoy those privileges, education, practicing our professions, having those social networks which other people take for granted, have an obligation not to drop the ladder through which we have climbed and put it in the closet, but to put our hands down and see how we can pull up the other women who are down there. And there are various ways that we can do this. One, depending on what your career is or what your profession is. If you are a doctor, we could use our medical skills to harness with other female doctors to push for better reproductive projects for women, protecting young children. If we are female lawyers, we can get together with other female lawyers to push for legislation that supports the equal ability of women to work within the workplace. We can support litigation that tests the extent and the strength of the legislation that exists. Because as someone said again in the morning sessions, sometimes there's fear. The legislation is there. I had a chat with my friend and sister during the break about, I tend to take the view that sometimes if there's no law, maybe that's actually a benefit, because you can actually test the waters and sensitize people as to maybe there should be a law. But what happens when there is a law? In Nigeria, we have just had a landmark judgment that has decided that a cultural, customary law practice that said that a woman could not inherit the property of her father was contrary to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. The case took like 16 years going through the courts. It was struck down at the High Court. The family of the father, the brothers and the uncles appealed against their sister. They were unsuccessful at the Court of Appeal. They went all the way to the Supreme Court. And we now have that judgment that says, if you're a woman, you are entitled by right to inherit from your father's estate. And these are things that women can do, irrespective of their professional backgrounds, to open that space and ensure that women have an equal opportunity to be at the table. Because it is only when we are at the table that we can contribute to peace and development. Everybody says that women are natural conciliators. It's in our genes. We are those who make peace. We are those who tend to be more rational and are able to bring warring sides together. But if we don't, for cultural reasons, even have the opportunity to exercise those God-given skills, then there will be no place for women in peace and development. So how do we get there? Short commentary. We need, as women, to work with ourselves, not against ourselves. Because sometimes that, again, is an issue. A woman who's successful is sometimes seen as an outlier. We need all those who have been able to break those glass ceilings in whatever manner they can to contribute to the debate, to the discussion, to shrug off the sense of, oh, I'm lucky, or I'm special, and emphasize that, oh, I'm only lucky and I'm only special because I was able to do it. There's so many women who can do it just as well as I can if they had the opportunities that I had. And then to ensure that those opportunities become available. So for women in business, for instance, opportunities to fund projects that will be of benefit to women, microcredit projects. We hear of so many richest women in Africa, richest women in this country, richest women in that country. These women also have an obligation to support women folk by engaging in opportunities that will assist other women to develop business and develop professions and contribute to the discourse. For as long as we are seen in a male-dominated society, and speaking of Africa, it is a male-dominated society. For as long as we are seen as not being equal, or if we are seen as being equal, we are seen as being equal because we are privileged, or because there's a quota. And so the sense is, oh, you're sitting at the table because you're fulfilling a quota, not that you're there as of right because you deserve to be there. Then that's the conversation we need to keep going. And we need to constantly challenge ourselves, those of us who are in this room. Are all privileged, means we've all had an education, as to what can each one of us do within our little communities to make women realize that, you know what, you can contribute to development through your local community development association, if there is one, through your town hall village meetings, if you have one, through sometimes manipulating your husband to say, well, when you go to that meeting, don't you think this is what you ought to mention? Have you thought about this? The main thing is to get the results. As long as we sit and wait for someone to do it, it's not going to happen. We are going to have to do it ourselves, and we're going to have to realize that we have the opportunity. There are enough of us who are privileged to have been educated to move this conversation forward. And that's when we can actually sit down at the peace and development table and contribute our full quota. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Any questions? No questions.